What happens when the funniest man alive wants to be taken seriously? In the mid-90s, Jim Carrey dominated Hollywood. With Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber all releasing in 1994, he became a phenomenon overnight, breaking salary records and cementing his status as the king of comedy. But for him, it wasn't enough. He wanted to prove he could do more than just make people laugh. Almost no one in 1994 could have imagined the star of Ace Ventura delivering powerful performances like in The Truman Show, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or Man on the Moon, but that's exactly what he did. But Hollywood didn't always know what to make of a dramatic Jim Carrey, and at times, neither did he. His pursuit of deeper roles brought some acclaim, but also alienation, failure, and a loss of faith in the industry he had once dreamed of conquering.
We don't matter. We don't matter.
Oh, wow.
There's the good news.
So today we're exploring this transformative chapter of Jim Carrey's career. What early struggles drove him to take such bold risks? How did he balance comedy and drama? And did his quest for more fulfill him? This is the story of when comedy wasn't enough. This is Jim Carrey. But first, I want to take a moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Displate. If you're looking to spice up your room, Displate is the perfect solution. Whether it's your office, man cave, or child's room, Displate has what you need. They offer high quality metal prints that, unlike paper, don't crease or fold and stay looking vibrant and colorful no matter where you hang them. With over 2 million artworks available in the Displate catalog, they'll for sure have something for everyone. They have officially licensed designs from the likes of Star Wars, Marvel, Elden Ring, and many, many more, and even new original artwork from thousands of creators around the world, making it an awesome platform for artists to share their unique designs on metal canvas. And on top of their glossy and matte finishes, they also have something called the Textra finish. This brings textures and 3D contours with selective matte and gloss effects, and oh man, this finish has leveled up what posters can be. They're continuously expanding their Textra catalog, so it'll be easy for your Displate collection to exceed your wall space, but don't let that stress you out. They have a solution for that. The magnet mounting system. It's tool-free, safe for your walls, and only takes seconds to mount or swap Displates anytime you want. And Displate just launched the official brand shop for Squid Game in collaboration with Quenzi, a Korean-based illustrator. Make sure to check them out if you like the series. We here at Filmstack, including my wife, absolutely loved the second season. Click the discount link in the description to get a discount automatically applied at checkout, or use our code FILMSTACK to get a great deal. Whether you need a last-minute gift or just a quick room makeover, place your order now and it will arrive in just 4 to 5 business days. Thank you Displate for sponsoring this video. Jim Carrey once said,
"I act because I'm broken in a lot of pieces, and acting gives me a chance to reconfigure those pieces into 1,000 different things that are positive for people to watch."
That vulnerability, rooted in personal struggles his whole life, shaped his approach to acting and motivated him to constantly adapt. Born in Newmarket, Canada in 1962, Carrey discovered his knack for impressions at just 8 years old. His family struggled financially, even living in a van in a tent at one point. At 16, he dropped out of school to support his family and pursue stand-up comedy with a focus on impressions, with his first act in 1977 bombing pretty badly. But instead of giving up, he refined his craft, returning to the stage 2 years later and earning regular gigs across Toronto and eventually Canada. He was booed off stage as an opening act and rejected by Saturday Night Live. Yet still, he kept going, eventually appearing in Canadian television films like Rubberface in the early 80s. After becoming popular in Canada, Carrey set his sights on Hollywood. In 1983, he moved to Los Angeles, but the transition was a bit rough. Early projects like the sitcom The Duck Factory flopped, and his first lead film role in Once Bitten received terrible reviews. He was rejected by SNL 2 more times in 1985 and 1986, with him starting to see the limits of his impressionist act. Realizing he needed to evolve, Carrey abandoned impressions and leaned into original, high-energy physical comedy and improvisation, the traits that would later define his career. The late 80s saw Carrey steadily build his resume. A supporting role in Francis Ford Coppola's Peggy Sue Got Married had some critical success, but it wasn't enough to make him a star. Appearances in Clint Eastwood's The Deadpool and Pink Cadillac hinted at his potential for dramatic roles, but failed to do much at the box office. Meanwhile, his stand-up act was transforming. Audiences didn't like it at first, but Carrey doubled down on his zany, unpredictable energy. It was this period of self-refinement that set the stage for his eventual breakthrough. And that breakthrough came in 1990 with In Living Color, a groundbreaking sketch comedy show where Carrey was one of the few white performers in a mainly black cast. His outrageous characters like Fire Marshal Bill were loved by audiences. The show helped him fine-tune his comedic style even more, and he even tweeted about the show in 2020 saying, "Brilliant black minds gave me a shot in Hollywood when none of the white guys thought I could connect or be a leading man. I got my first starring role because of In Living Color." And that role came in 1994. At the age of 32, after nearly 2 decades of hard work, Carrey became an overnight sensation. It all began with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Playing the animal detective, Carrey brought some of his stand-up routine into the role, improvising a ton and creating the now iconic catchphrase, "Alrighty then." The film was hated by critics but became a massive box office hit. And then later that year, he starred in The Mask with such an animated performance that it reportedly saved millions in special effects. The film grossed over $350 million worldwide, earned him his first Golden Globe nomination, and proved he was no one-hit wonder. And he was only paid $450,000 for the role because the deal was signed before Ace Ventura's box office success, unlike his final 1994 film. In Dumb and Dumber, Carrey played the lovable but not so bright Lloyd Christmas. This time he negotiated a $7 million salary, a huge leap from his earlier roles. The film, again filled with his improvisation, was another box office smash, solidifying 1994 as the year Jim Carrey took over Hollywood. Back in 1985, during a rough period in his life, he wrote a $10 million check for acting services rendered to his future self in 10 years. He carried it in his wallet as a daily reminder of his goal, and by the end of 1994, he achieved it, believing it was predestined. The momentum carried into 1995 with Batman Forever, where he played the Riddler, another larger-than-life character. While the film was a hit, there was some tension amongst the cast, with Tommy Lee Jones straight up telling Carrey that he hated him and couldn't sanction his buffoonery. Later that year, Carrey reprised his role in Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls due to contractual obligations. Despite earning $10 million for the sequel, Carrey regretted making the film, disliking some of the creative choices and feeling it was a step backwards. While it was a box office success, he knew he couldn't sustain a career on over-the-top characters alone. And to avoid being typecast or losing relevance, he knew he needed to evolve. In 1996, Carrey starred in The Cable Guy. Although still a comedy, its darker tone and Carrey's unsettling performance was a bit different than the previous films. Carrey earned a record-breaking $20 million for this film, but the film's mixed reviews and modest box office returns suggested that audiences were beginning to get a bit tired of his act again. By now, Carrey was grappling with the question: how much longer could he rely on zany comedy to keep audiences engaged? The cracks in his comedic style were showing again, and the stage was set for his most daring leap yet, a reinvention as a more dramatic actor. In 1997, Jim Carrey began to show audiences a new side of him with Liar Liar. While still a full-blown comedy, the role marked a shift towards something more grounded. For the first time, Carrey played what he described as a normal person, playing a lawyer cursed with the inability to lie. Director Tom Shadyac joked that they wanted to do a film without flatulence, though they admitted they couldn't grow up that fast.
Is your relationship with my client entirely platonic? Not! Is not your relationship with my client, boink!
Despite its comedic plot, the film gave Carrey the opportunity to explore more relatable humor and character depth. Critics took notice of this. Even Roger Ebert, a longtime Carrey hater, said, "I am gradually developing a suspicion, or perhaps it is a fear, that Jim Carrey is growing on me." The film was a massive success, earning over $300 million worldwide and getting Carrey his second Golden Globe nomination. Liar Liar proved that Carrey didn't need to rely on his zany characters to entertain audiences, teasing his leap into drama. That leap came in 1998 with The Truman Show, where Carrey portrayed Truman Burbank, a man whose entire life is unknowingly broadcast as a reality show.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
The role was a gamble for Carrey, who had to tone down his comedic tendencies, and for director Peter Weir, who was working with a star best known for slapstick humor. Carrey took the role almost immediately, even accepting a pay cut down to $12 million. To help himself and the crew take the project seriously, Carrey apparently banned anyone on set from quoting his earlier comedies. Carrey and Weir clashed early on, especially over rewrites, but their tension eventually turned into mutual respect. When the film released, audiences and critics were shocked. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert publicly apologized on air for saying earlier that Carrey would never have a career. The Truman Show was a commercial and critical triumph, grossing $264 million worldwide and earning Carrey a Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Drama. Yet despite the acclaim, Carrey was notably snubbed by the Oscars. Still, the success of The Truman Show showed us that Carrey was more than just a comedic powerhouse. It proved he could be a serious actor. But even after this success, Carrey admitted years later, "I was at the top of the mountain and I was the only one there. It didn't fulfill me." The gap between what he achieved in Hollywood and what he truly wanted was beginning to widen. In 1999, Carrey pushed his boundaries even further with Man on the Moon, a biographical drama about the life of eccentric comedian Andy Kaufman. Determined to fully embody Kaufman, Carrey took method acting to an infamous extreme. On set, he refused to respond to his own name, demanding to be called either Kaufman or Kaufman's rude alter ego, Tony Clifton. He adopted Kaufman's tics and mannerisms even off camera, antagonizing co-stars like Jerry Lawler, even spitting in his face and staging elaborate pranks that blurred the line between acting and reality. The process took a toll, not just on the cast and crew, but on Carrey himself. In later interviews, he admitted that he lost his sense of self during the shoot. Reflecting on the experience, Carrey said, "I didn't know who I was anymore. I was Andy, and Andy was me." The performance was praised, earning Carrey his second Golden Globe, this time for a comedy. Yet still, just like The Truman Show, Carrey was again snubbed by the Oscars. And to make matters worse, Man on the Moon flopped at the box office, marking Carrey's first major flop since his rise to fame. The emotional and financial toll of the film really left Carrey questioning his identity, later even saying, "I don't exist. Jim Carrey is a character."
You know, Jim Carrey is a great character, and I was lucky to get the part.
As the new millennium began, Carrey found himself at a crossroads, balancing the comedies that made him famous with dramatic roles that challenged him as an artist. In 2000, he starred in Me, Myself, and Irene, a return to his slapstick roots that received mixed reviews, especially for the outdated humor. Later that year, he took on his first major children's film, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The production was notoriously grueling, with Carrey enduring hours of makeup application each day. The discomfort was so intense that Carrey sought advice from a CIA operative trained in torture resistance. But despite the challenges, Carrey's over-the-top performance as the Grinch was adored by audiences, and the film became a holiday classic, grossing over $345 million worldwide and earning Carrey another Golden Globe nomination. It also opened a new path for him as a performer, showing his ability to captivate younger audiences with his physical humor and larger-than-life characters. Carrey closed off this experimental phase of his career with The Majestic in 2001, a drama about a blacklisted screenwriter with amnesia. While the film gave Carrey the opportunity to showcase his more serious acting once more, it failed to connect with audiences and critics, grossing only $37 million against a $72 million budget. The failure of The Majestic marked a turning point. The highs of The Truman Show and How the Grinch Stole Christmas were offset by the lows of The Man on the Moon and The Majestic, leaving Carrey very uncertain in his place in the industry. He was no longer the invincible comedy king of the 90s, nor had he fully established himself as a dramatic actor. The uncertainty, coupled with Carrey's lack of fulfillment with his career, set the stage for a period of retreat and personal reflection. As Jim Carrey stepped back to reassess his place in Hollywood, the industry itself was undergoing a huge shift. Franchises and IP-driven blockbusters were taking center stage, and audiences' tastes changed. For Carrey, who was grappling with creative fulfillment and personal identity issues, the bigger question wasn't just what kind of actor he wanted to be, but whether Hollywood still had a place for him at all. Carrey continued to experiment across the three genres that had defined his career so far: comedy, drama, and very recently, family films. In 2003, he returned to the kind of grounded comedy that once brought him massive success with Bruce Almighty. Playing a TV reporter who temporarily gains God's powers for a week, Carrey leaned into the relatable humor that made Liar Liar so popular. While critics were divided, the film was a massive box office success, grossing over $484 million worldwide. It also marked Carrey's first producer credit, a sign of him wanting more creative control. But then in 2004, Carrey delivered what many consider one of his greatest performances in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Playing Joel, a man undergoing a procedure to erase memories of his ex-girlfriend, Carrey shed every trace of his comedic persona, delivering a deeply vulnerable and restrained performance. The role hit close to home for Carrey, who was battling depression at the time. He later recalled director Michel Gondry telling him in their first meeting, "You are so broken, please don't get well," using it as an example to tell us how effed up this business is, a business he's starting to resent. Gondry also used unconventional directing methods, like encouraging Kate Winslet to approach the role as comedic and carefree as she can, telling her it's a comedy while instructing Carrey to remain grounded and serious because it's a drama film. The result was better than they could have imagined. Eternal Sunshine was so critically praised and earned Carrey another Golden Globe nomination, but yet again, no Oscar nomination. That same year, Carrey gave family films another go with a series of unfortunate events where he played the villainous Count Olaf. The role required hours of makeup each day, with Carrey's transformation even scaring some of the child actors on set.
I'm going to get you no matter where you go, no matter what you do, I'll find you.
While the film performed decently at the box office, it fell short of its franchise ambitions. Carrey's next project, Fun with Dick and Jane, returned him to safe comedic territory. While the film was financially successful, critics panned the film, calling it uninspired, accusing it of leaning on his dated slapstick humor. The pattern was becoming clear. Carrey's comedies were no longer innovating, and his dramas, though sometimes critically acclaimed, weren't connecting with mainstream audiences. In 2007, Carrey starred in The Number 23, a psychological thriller that was a critical disaster, even earning Carrey a Worst Actor Razzie nomination. It was a harsh blow, and the film's failure only deepened Carrey's struggle with his place in Hollywood. Later reflecting on this period, how he felt Hollywood didn't value what he had to offer and how he wasn't sure he wanted to be part of it anymore. The following year, Carrey returned to a lighter film with Yes Man, where he played a man who decides to say yes to everything for a year. The film was a financial hit, grossing over $230 million, but critics pointed out its similarities to Liar Liar and noted that Carrey's comedic style was beginning to feel repetitive yet again. In 2009, Carrey took one of his boldest risks in years with I Love You, Philip Morris, a dark romantic comedy based on a true story. Playing a con artist who falls in love with another inmate, Carrey delivered a performance that was both hilarious and deeply moving. Critics praised the film, but its niche appeal and struggles with distribution resulted in a limited box office run. For every dramatic success like Eternal Sunshine, there was a disappointment like The Number 23. For every comedy hit like Bruce Almighty, there was a soft response to something like Fun with Dick and Jane. It was clear, the transition he'd been working on for over a decade wasn't as successful as he'd hoped for. He proved he can act, but project selection and consistency is even more important in this kind of industry. Around this time, Carrey began to speak openly about his frustrations with the industry, describing Hollywood as meaningless, and began looking to channel his creative energy into something else. By the early 2010s, Jim Carrey had all but stepped back from the Hollywood spotlight. His output slowed dramatically, and when he did take roles, they rarely had the magic of his peak days. Mr. Popper's Penguins performed okay. The Incredible Burt Wonderstone was one of his lowest openings ever. And Kick-Ass 2 did well enough commercially, but he didn't promote or support the film's violence because of the Newtown Elementary School shooting in 2012. One of his only big hits this period was his return as Lloyd Christmas for the sequel Dumb and Dumber 2 in 2014, and even that film he wasn't a fan of. He continued describing Hollywood as meaningless publicly and criticized its obsession with fame and profits. He later said,
Was that you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
So during this time, Carrey turned to painting and writing instead. His artwork, often abstract and deeply personal, became a way for him to process his emotions and explore his identity outside of acting, even making some art NFTs in 2022. He published a children's book in 2013 titled How Roland Rolls that helps kids deal with heavier topics. His political cartoons in the late 2010s revealed a more outspoken side of him. And his memoir titled Memoirs and Misinformation, published in 2020, offered a look at his career and the problems with fame. But this period of exploring wasn't without tragedy. In 2015, Carrey's ex-girlfriend Catriona White died by suicide, leaving behind a note about the relationship. The loss deeply affected Carrey, and he became a source of public scrutiny when White's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against him. Though the case was eventually dismissed, the incident left Carrey visibly shaken, and he further distanced himself from the Hollywood spotlight, taking on even less roles. For the rest of the decade, he only had a smaller role in The Bad Batch, which wasn't good, had another go at drama with Dark Crimes, which got shredded by critics, and starred in the show Kidding, where he got a Golden Globe nomination, a return to form. But in 2020, Carrey surprised everyone with his role as Dr. Robotnik in Sonic the Hedgehog. The film was a return to his comedic roots, allowing him to channel the exaggerated energy that made him a star in the 90s. The performance felt like vintage Jim Carrey, and his larger-than-life take on Robotnik received a lot of praise. The film was a huge box office hit, with Carrey reprising the role for 2 more sequels in 2022 and 2024, with each doing well commercially. The Sonic films marked his most high-profile work in years and became a rare instance of Carrey enjoying a project without the personal and professional weight that often came with his earlier dramatic roles. He said it was one of his favorite roles of his career, especially with how much he was able to improvise, with very little of the dialogue from the page of the script ending up in the movie. But sadly, it's highly likely that this was his last film role, with him mentioning many times he's fairly serious about retiring from acting. For Carrey, it seems that the motivation to chase after Hollywood has given way to a quieter and more reflective chapter of his life. He once said, "Life opens up opportunities to you, and you either take them or you stay afraid of taking them." After decades of risk-taking, reinvention, and redefining what it means to be a comedic icon, Carrey appears to have chosen to embrace what fulfills him the most, even if that means stepping away from the very spotlight he sought after so much most of his life. His journey from a struggling Canadian comedian to one of the world's biggest stars was defined by constantly evolving and a desire for more. Along the way, he faced acclaim, heartbreak, and a growing disillusionment with an industry that rarely valued creativity over profit. In recent years, he's found fulfillment in art, writing, and the occasional film, reminding us that success is more than just profits. So for Jim Carrey, comedy wasn't enough, but Hollywood wasn't either. So there you have it, Jim Carrey's career and his search for something more. What do you think of his career? Share your thoughts below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe, and check out our Patreon for some cool perks. But until next time, have a good one.